What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today I wanted to talk about attachments in general in Modern Warfare and share what I feel to be the best and the worst attachments that you can possibly use. Now of course, keep in mind as I go through this video, a lot of it is opinion based, but I really did try to look at this as objectively as possible. And also I tried to focus on attachments that you see at least on a large number of guns. Obviously I'm not going to be picking out unique attachments that only apply to one or two guns in the game. I tried to pick attachments that you'll see at least on like an entire class of weapons or maybe even all of the weapons in the game. Now one last important disclaimer before we get into the list here is of course there will be some exceptions to this. Just because I say an attachment is generally bad on most of the guns in the game, that doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't one or two guns where it's actually pretty good to use that attachment. But without further ado, let's hop into what I consider to be some of the best attachments in the game. The first one, you guys will see this on most of my class setups when I do my gun guide series, stippled pistol grip. With this attachment, you get improved aim down sight as well as sprint out time, and this comes at the cost of aiming stability. In this case, the upsides by far outweigh the downsides in almost all situations, and it doesn't matter what your playstyle is, even if you are more of a defensive player, having improved aim down sight time and the bonus of sprint out time is still going to help you in many situations. As a result, I would say you absolutely can't go wrong with stippled pistol grip. Moving on to the second attachment that you really can't go wrong with, that is great to use with almost any gun in the game, this is sleight of hand. Now I know it's a weapon perk, but it is falling in the attachment category, so I am going to consider perks as attachments in this video. And sleight of hand is just one of those ones where there's no downside to it, and it's always great to have a faster reload. Doesn't really matter what gun you're using, whether that be an SMG, a shotgun, a sniper rifle, an LMG, it doesn't matter. It is always a nice boost to have a noticeably faster reload speed, and sleight of hand does this for you with no downsides whatsoever. As for the next attachment that you really can't go wrong with, this is the 1mW laser. Now, of course, there are going to be more exceptions to this one than the other ones that I've mentioned so far, but for most of these standard guns like assault rifles and SMGs, for instance, you can't go wrong using a 1mW laser. It's a great choice for an attachment. It does help your hipfire spread by a noticeable amount, and you might see a trend here. There's really no noticeable downside to the 1mW laser. It doesn't hurt you at all to use this, and therefore, once again, this is just another one of those attachments where you can't go wrong using it. Now moving on to the next attachment, or I actually put two attachments together here, and I'll explain in a little bit, that are excellent to use with most of the guns in the game. These are the compensator or the muzzle brake. Now the reason I included these together is you do have to choose these depending on the gun that you're using, but they're both great in their own way. Now for those of you guys that aren't aware, compensator helps with recoil control, which helps with the total magnitude of your recoil. So if a gun kicks upwards really strong, for instance, then compensator is an excellent choice for you and you can't go wrong using it. If, however, your gun tends to bounce side to side a lot as it's firing, this is where muzzle brake comes in and becomes the better choice than compensator. So as long as you're choosing the right one of these two muzzle attachments, depending on the type of recoil that you get for the particular gun you're using, these are excellent options to use as attachments, and I feel they are actually a little bit underrated. I honestly don't see them used too often in public matches, at least from guns that I pick up off the ground, for instance, and they absolutely help with your accuracy with very little noticeable downside to them. So that pretty much covers it for those universal sort of attachments that are just good in almost every single situation that you're using them in. And that's not to say that there aren't other amazing attachments, but a lot of the other attachments, they really depend on what the strengths and weaknesses are of a particular gun, and therefore they need to be judged more on a case-by-case basis. But now it's time to move into what I feel are some of the worst attachments in the game that you almost always want to just completely avoid using. Now before we do that, I decided not to place a mid-roll ad on this video because I am working with Kontrol Freek on a huge giveaway for you guys that I think you'll be interested in joining. They're actually giving away 10 PS5s as well as 10 Xbox Series X's, which is a massive giveaway, and it's really easy to enter. All you have to do is click the link that I'll leave down below, and from there, all you have to do to enter this is to follow Kontrol Freek on various platforms like Instagram, Facebook. Each one of those follows will count as an entry, as well as a few of the partners like myself that are working with this giveaway and promoting it essentially and sharing it with you guys. So if you follow me on Twitter already, then you just have to confirm that you're already following me, and that will count as an entry. And if you're not following me on Twitter, I hope that you'll consider that, because that will also count as an entry for you guys. Like I said, link for that will be in the description down below, and best of luck to all of you. But with that, let's get back to the video, and let's go over some of the worst attachments in this game. And the first one is the lightweight suppressor. This suppressor, in almost all cases, will reduce all of your range values by 25%, which is a massive reduction to your range. And the only benefit you're gaining from this is that sound suppression, which you can get easily from other sources, like the tactical suppressor, or even better, the monolithic suppressor. On top of that, many of the guns also have barrels that have integrated suppressors, so there's just too many alternatives to using this that don't have that severe downside of a 25% loss of range. And this is why in almost every case you want to avoid using the lightweight suppressor. Moving on to the next attachment that I consider to be one of the worst attachments to use in the game, this is the flash guard. Now the flash guard helps with your muzzle flash, which honestly when I'm looking at the muzzle flash in this game, it has never even been noticeable for me. I really don't see any muzzle flash most of the time anyways, and as a result, I just don't see the flash guard ever changing any situation for me. It never makes the difference between life and death. It's not even noticeable, even if you're really looking for it. In most cases, you won't even notice a difference when it comes to muzzle flash, and neither will your enemies. And this benefit that you never really notice comes at the cost of your bullet velocity, which you will notice, especially in mid to longer range fights when enemies are moving. It's going to make it that much more difficult to hit your target. And as a result, I can't see any justification for ever using a flash guard in this game. In my experience, it only makes your gun worse. As for the next one on my list, this is a combination of several attachments, and these are all of the underbarrel launchers. Now, these aren't super universal attachments that you see on like every gun in the game, but you do see it on a good chunk of the weapons. And when I look at these, there are very few situations where the upsides are worth the downsides. Now, the only one I could really maybe see an argument for would be like the underbarrel smoke grenade, just because that smoke grenade can be really helpful for objective play, for instance. But when I look at like the underbarrel grenade launcher or the underbarrel stun or flash, I just don't see that being worth an attachment slot, as well as reduced movement and aim down sight speed for your gun. Especially because Scavenger doesn't replenish these, so you get to use it once per life, and that one use per life isn't worth the downsides of this. It's going to make the average gunfight that much more difficult for you in exchange for one thing that you can use one time that may or may not help you. And this is why, unless you're bored and you want to mess around with some strange setups, I don't really see any reason to use underbarrel launchers in Modern Warfare. This brings us to the next attachment that I consider to be one of the worst in the game, and I never choose on any of my classes when the option is available. This is the bipod. Now, this might seem like a strange choice because the bipod actually has no downsides, or at least no listed downsides that we're aware of. And what it does is it helps with your recoil when you're either crouched or prone. Now, the reason I never use bipod, and probably never will, is because in most situations, you're better off standing in a gunfight and maintaining your mobility. When you're crouching or going prone, you become a sitting duck and you're pretty easy to shoot. And the amount that the bipod helps with the recoil just doesn't make up for the reduced mobility, in my opinion. Now, if it reduced your recoil even more than it currently did, then yeah, I would probably recommend it. But at this point, it only helps your recoil slightly more than another underbarrel attachment like a commando foregrip or an operator foregrip or merc foregrip does. And those foregrips are working all the time. Doesn't matter if you're standing, crouched, prone, jumping. Those are always helping you. And on top of that, if you are playing in a playstyle that tends to support the use of a bipod where you are hanging back at a distance, crouched or prone waiting to shoot your target, you're honestly better off just mounting on a surface, because that's going to really significantly improve your recoil, much more than the bipod does, and you don't need to waste an important attachment slot on that. So this is why I honestly just don't see myself ever choosing that bipod attachment. As for the next attachment on my list here that I consider to be one of the worst attachments you can choose, this is once again delving into the weapon perk section, which I do consider to be an attachment because it is competing for an attachment slot on your weapon, and this is the fast melee weapon perk. With this, you're able to get those consecutive melee hits a little bit faster, so after you hit them the first time with the butt of your gun, you can hit them the second time just a little bit faster, although based on my testing that I did a while back, this is hardly noticeable. We're looking at just a few frames faster at 60 FPS, and in a lot of cases, you literally can't tell the difference between fast melee and not having fast melee equipped. Plus, to stack on top of that, how often are you really running around and hitting people twice with the butt of your weapon? Even if it did help a noticeable amount, this is the type of thing that would help so infrequently that it's just not worth wasting an attachment slot on when you could be using so many other things that are actually helping you in many of the gunfights that you're finding yourself in. So this is why I just always stay away from fast melee. And this brings us to the final one that I wanted to mention in today's video that I consider to be one of the worst attachments to use. This is once again going to be a weapon perk, and this is Frangible Disabling. Now, Frangible Disabling, the way this works is it will disable Tactical Sprint on somebody that's using Tactical Sprint at that moment, and it will temporarily slow them down, but only if you're shooting them in the legs. And that's the key with this one. You have to be shooting them in the legs. And this is just one of those things where, first off, it really enforces bad habits in a gunfight. You never want to be actively aiming at enemy legs. That's just a dumb idea, especially with the really fast time to kill in this game. By the time you're even thinking about slowing down that enemy player by taking aim at their legs, you could have already just dropped them if you aimed at their torso. And in addition to that, this effect is hardly even noticeable on the receiving end when enemies are using it against you. So once again, this is just another one of those things that I never see myself choosing on a gun in this game. But with that, that pretty much covers it for my list of what I consider to be some of the best and worst attachments to use in Modern Warfare. Of course though, like I said at the beginning, these are my opinions based on some of my preferences and a little bit based on my playstyle. But like I said, I did try to remain objective and think outside of the more aggressive playstyle that I prefer. But of course, I'd like to know in the comment section below, what would you guys add to these lists? Whether that be best attachments or worst attachments, what do you think I missed in today's video? Just let me know those thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.